People always talk about the importance of self-love and that to find love, you need to first love yourself. But no one really talks about how to do this. And so in this video, I'm going to break down 5 simple steps that you can follow to experience a greater sense of self-love. In the past, when I had levels of low self-love, I didn't know at the time, but looking back, I can see that that was the case because I had a partner who would pursue women that he found attractive while he was with me. And it didn't feel good. It felt icky. And at the time, I had a wound of feeling not good enough. Instead of communicating my feelings and how his behavior was not okay, I internalized his behavior. And I felt like, oh, he's doing this because I'm not pretty enough. And had I had higher self-love at the time, I would have set a standard like this. I'm not okay with this in my relationships. If you want to pursue other women while you're with me, go be single. But at the time, I did not do that. And I stayed in that relationship and things just got worse. And learn from my mistakes. The first step to having self-love is having strong boundaries and standards. And so, what are boundaries? Boundaries can be viewed as the way you want to be treated, and as well as a way for you to check on your limited resources, such as energy, time, finances, things like that. And healthy boundary setting is when you take yourself into consideration when making choices. Of course, you consider other people, but not at the expense of yourself, which is where a lot of people fall into, where they make choices at the expense of themselves, which is what we don't want to do when we're trying to build strong boundaries. And the way we do this is by noticing our feelings and using our feelings as a guidance system. If we experience anger, frustration, or resentment, it could be a sign that a boundary has been violated. In my example, right, if it felt like a boundary had been violated because I felt icky. And part of me also felt angry. What the fuck? Why is he doing that? And so that was a sign for me, right, based off of my emotions, using them as a guidance system, that a boundary had been violated. Then the right thing to do would have been to communicate that that was a boundary for me, what the behavior was not okay. And so when we communicate our boundaries, we want to communicate in a very kind but assertive way, right? Because boundaries aren't up for negotiation. Needs are, but not boundaries. And once I started having strong boundaries and actually setting standards for myself, that was an act of self-love. Because ultimately, I was setting a standard of I deserve to be treated well. I deserve to be respected. When you set standards, that is what you are communicating. If you want to have self-love, step 1, set strong boundaries and standards. And step 2 is communicating your feelings and understanding your needs. And so this is kind of correlated to also step 1, right? Because in order to set boundaries, we need to also communicate our feelings. But in order to communicate our feelings, we must first understand our feelings and acknowledge our feelings. Because oftentimes we end up in situations that are not loving to us when we don't acknowledge our feelings. When I think back to toxic relationships, there were times where things didn't feel so good, right? And because I didn't acknowledge those feelings, then bad things started stacking up. And so if you want to have a loving relationship to yourself, feel your feelings, listen to your feelings. Your feelings are essentially your internal system giving you signals of what's going on inside. And so what I would compare it to is a car. When your car's engine, not a car person, but you know how when your tire is going low, your little engine light goes on, or the light for that goes on. And if you ignore it, then your car breaks down. And that's similar to our bodies. Our emotions are our body's signal telling us hey, something's going on here. And when we ignore it, then different consequences can happen, because essentially energy cannot be created or destroyed, and emotions are energy. And so if you just suppress them, they'll come up in different ways, either through your behavior, through coping mechanisms, through lashing out, through disease. And it's important to communicate, to first feel, understand, and communicate your feelings, because then you're just letting if you think of your body as a car, you're just letting your car break down. You don't want to do that. And then in terms of understanding your needs and communicating your needs, that is understanding and building a communication or language for how you want to be loved. Which brings us to step 3, which is loving yourself in your love language. Because in order for you to communicate how you want to be loved, you must first need to understand how to do that with yourself. And so if you're not familiar with love languages, there is words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and gifts. And there are free online tests you can take. If you don't know what your love language is, go take the test. And once you know what your 2 top love languages are, start loving yourself in that way. Set up one-on-one time with yourself and love yourself in your love language, because that is ultimately you giving yourself love and showing yourself like, hey, you're worthy of love. Like, you're worthy of your heart getting filled up. And in addition to that, then you'll be able to communicate easily how you want to be loved, which then makes you even feel more loved, which is so important for self-love. Now, step 4 is to do activities that bring you joy. Because often when we lack self-love, it's because we have been dismissing ourselves or neglecting ourselves for a long time. And maybe you've been caught up in just work or school or doing things for other people and neglecting yourself, that you've forgotten to spend time doing things that make you happy, that bring you joy. And when you do activities that bring you joy, you're ultimately feeding your inner child. And when you feed your inner child, you also allow for your creativity to come out. And if you're having trouble with figuring out what activities you can do that bring you joy, think back to when you were a kid. What did you enjoy doing? What did you just love to spend hours doing? Was it being outdoors in nature? Was it dancing, singing, being silly, drawing? Whatever it is, bring more of that into your life. Make pockets of time, even if it's just 5 minutes, to do that thing. And you'll start feeling your heart come back to life. And then step 5 is to address your blocks. When it comes to self-love, typically blocks that I see in my clients are feeling a lack of worth, like I'm not worthy, or I'm bad, or I'm not enough. Those are common ones that I see. Whatever block you feel in your body that's making you feel like, oh, I'm not worthy of love, tune into that and give yourself proof and show yourself how you are worthy or enough or good. And do this on a daily basis. And you can come up with a mantra, affirmation, or give yourself just proof that of those things. Or you could do mirror work as well. And before you know it, those blocks are going to start just simmering away. And recap, 5 simple steps that you can do to have more self-love are: have strong needs and boundaries, voice your feelings and needs, spend time with yourself through your love language, do activities that bring you joy, and address your blocks. If you start implementing these 5 things into your life, I can guarantee you will have stronger self-love. I hope you found this video useful and sending you my love.